Hello, everybody. Welcome to Speaker Sunday. Super happy to have you guys, and thank you so much for just following along the journey that we have with developing Lords of Nysera. My name is Lilette, and I am the producer for Lords of Nysera, so I just do a lot of the support work, a lot of the YouTube stuff, and we also, of course, have our very favorite Lazy Warlock, who's going to be telling us about, well, actually, I'll just hand it on over to you.
Yeah. So I'm the Lazy Warlock. I'm the lead developer and artist on the Lords of Nysera video game. And today I'm coming to you to talk about all the things I've been up to. It's been a little quiet, but I've been out of town and I'm back to work. I've been back to work for about a couple of weeks now. So I'm back in the swing of things and making progress. And Chapter 5 is almost done, which is great because we are nearing a really big milestone, which is Chapter 6. It marks a big turning point not only in the story, but in the entire development cycle that we're on, because it means we're halfway to the mark of all the chapters that we want for the release, which is super cool. Let's just start things off and talk about what I've been doing. So a big part of Chapter 5, the music's... Oh, okay. Sorry, I'm talking a little loud and talking a little fast, so... my bad, guys. But yeah, so I get excited because we haven't done a Speaker Sunday in a little bit, and I've been kind of gearing up to talk about this one. Nothing crazy so much as it's more or less a devlog at this point. But yeah, I wanted to show off kind of all these cool things I've been working through. So big thing I did while I was on my little venture out there was I worked on some portraits. I have two characters that show up in Chapter 5 specifically that are enemies, actually, but they have their own backstories because every enemy you fight is not just some mook. I mean, there's the mooks that are unnamed, that are just units, of course, but their leaders are not just mooks. And so they have their own little backstories, their own reasons for why they're doing things, other than, maybe they're as petty as I want to be promoted to the next rank, but I try to not do that kind of stuff. So Chapter 5 is all about the final sort of retaking of Sars, which are these rebels to the Avalonian Dominion. And there's a whole bunch of Sartians that have banded together in order to accomplish this task, and they're on dire straits now. So there was a lot of cool coding that I did for this specific chapter. It should be really fun for the players to fight because you're kind of competing against another lord in this one. So in previous ones, you were either aiding another lord and had them as allies in the battle, or they were coming to your aid. Either which way, you had plenty of people that were working directly with you to accomplish the task. In this one, they are working with you, but you kind of realize that you've been given the crappier task, and yet you're expected to both accomplish this feat of taking back Sars. And so a sort of sub objective is to capture this place before the other team does. So it should be really interesting. I haven't completely tested it just yet. I tested all the individual events for the most part, and they all work swimmingly. There's a lot of conversations that go on this one because there's a lot of people who are conflicted about this specific battle. And so that was really fun to write up. And then I got to these characters here. So let's show the Sartian first, actually. So this is one of the characters I showed off on the Discord recently. And her name's Hirst. And she's kind of interesting because she's not completely Sartian. She leads a Sartian clan, but it's a Sartian clan that borders Veltwin, which is far to the west in Avalon. And it's sort of this... It was never really incorporated into Avalon as in general. It's part of the same continent, technically. It's sort of like split off and connected by a few little isthmuses. I think that's what they're called. Anyways, so her clan borders this other group, and so they have a lot of influence with them. Part of it being that they are real sturdy people who their tactics in warfare are pretty much hunkered down and fight it out to the last person. And they kind of give no fricks about anything. They will do all that they have to do to take you down with them. And so she's been tasked with the final defense of Sarsen this way. So pretty interesting to face off against her because she has very different tactics than the leader that came before her. And I just love her design. I had to redesign her a little bit because I was having trouble doing her armor. My old sketch was not great, and this new one that I did turned out wonderful. I had used actually the armor that I had developed as a reference, and this is a more like point-to-point version of that as opposed to the one that shows up on a different character. But that's besides the point. You may notice she has an interesting hammer here. So it's it's more or less a sledgehammer. It's a maul. Mauls were used occasionally in warfare, especially against armored units. And her group specifically is very good at taking down armored units. And her kind of clan weapon is this famous one here called Quake. And it's got these cool little inscriptions that give it its name. It's made from a specific type of wood here called saber sage, which is from Veltwyn to the west. And so she has this kind of influence of this weapon was forged partly by her people, but partly by the neighboring country's people as well. So neat little weapon that you, of course, can get from her if you manage to defeat her and get the item. So that's her. And then the other character, oh, and for those rock hounds out there, if you can guess what type of agate this is right here, you win a cookie. If not, that's okay, because I'm a rock nerd and this is only a couple pixels. So if you can't figure it out, no big deal.
Wait, a cookie?
Yeah, you get a cookie.
A digital cookie or a real
digital?
Cookie?
Well, I am not going to be able to send a real cookie to someone.
What?
So it will be a digital cookie.
Okay, I'll do a digital cookie.
Okay. But that's only if they guess the right one. Okay. But it is the type of agate. That's the only hint you get.
I'm sorry. I'm really focused on this cookie. Is it like you're gonna draw a cookie? Digital cookie?
I could draw like a Sarsen cookie. I'll do that. I'll draw a Sarsen cookie, and whoever wins gets the Sarsen cookie.
Oh my goodness. Okay. I love it. Love it.
Okay. So that's one of the characters I added.
And sorry, I just wanted to remark on the stripes, like the blue stripes.
Oh
right?
Yeah, I love stripes.
Yeah. And the green and blue, like I know Sarsens are earthy people, right? So
yep.
A lot of natural colors is kind of their color palette. And you recently made a character generator for NPCs, and when you were telling me about it, these color palettes are, meticulously crafted to represent where these NPCs come from. So the game, at least how the character generator works in your game, from what you've told me, is you meet an NPC from a village. Maybe you have a conversation with the baker there, and it generates this random NPC person, and it's like this mixture of faces or facial structures and hairstyles, but also clothing. And the clothing can be different colors and such, and the colors for the clothes apparently match the NPC like where they've come from. So is that true?
Yep, yeah, that's true. So it uses, actually, it's pretty nifty. So every specific region has their own palette that it uses for the units in game, and they're meant to be kind of uniform, right? Because they're a uniform army. But what the villager one does, though, is that it draws from that specific region and then all the bordering regions. So it gets this mix of potential color schemes that it can use with their clothes. And so it does, and the colors mostly represent, it's not always I try to avoid the Avatar The Last Airbender thing, where it's like, we're the Fire Nation and we wear red, and we're the Earth Nation and we wear yellow and green, and and so on and so forth, right? I try to avoid that specific color coding, and instead try and think of, okay, what kind of dyes do they actually have access to in this region, right? And how would they apply that to regular clothes and such. So, were you gonna ask something, Lilette?
Well, I also like the hammer that she has. It's a hammer, right?
Yep.
Yeah, it has like a blade guard, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like if if she was fighting someone, she could actually block with her hammer.
Right, yeah, that's what distinguishes it from, like, say, a regular sledgehammer that doesn't have something like that, right? It wouldn't need it.
Right.
Whereas this is specifically, and you can see it has a little, like, a grip here even at the top, and so she can grip it up there and swing it closer if she needs to. So it's definitely, like, meant to be a weapon. So a maul like this is, funny as it may sound, like, a weapon like this would still be really huge and heavy in like our medieval times, right? It would be extremely unwieldy. You would only give it to people who are like behind the front lines, and what they're actually doing is like going to fallen knights of the enemy and coup de graceing them.
Oh
So
my god.
they get knocked down and they can't get up and they have no weapon on them or something, and they just like, oh, I found another one, and they just squish their head more or less.
Oh
But
god.
in this case, it's made of specific metals, and she's specifically is a metal forger, and so she can lighten this hammer to make it feel like it's like a wooden mallet to her. So it hits with the strength of like a proper maul, but it doesn't feel like one to her. So it's a formidable weapon.
God. That's actually really scary. I feel like if I fell on the battlefield, I just shed that honor and just go running, streaking across the field.
Yeah, and to one more little thing to note on about those color schemes you mentioned. So her color scheme is this bluish green, right? This is definitely one of Veltwin. Veltwin has these very like dark, somber tones to their equipment and their appearance, and that's why she has this like sort of very rich blue colors, whereas a proper Sarshan color looks more like this. So this is your classic earthen tones that the leader of the Sartians has. So like with the dark reds, those like umber colors, ochre. She's got like obviously the red hair. She's like your epitome of a Sartian warrior with her getup. So yeah, so that's Hirst. I took a long time on this one, made sure to do it right, and I had a lot of fun with it. I actually had a little moment where I said to like, I can't believe it, but I have to completely redraw this character. It's turning out horrible. And then I woke up the next day and I was like, okay, it's not so bad. I just have to like retry on the armor a bit, and it turned out fine. Okay, the other character is Lugal. So this guy has actually a lot of history with a few characters in the game, and I won't spoil anything about the battle specifically, but he was a really fun one to do because I haven't worked on many like damaged equipment individuals that are like proper units that aren't like bandits and whatnot. So you can see that he's got like scrapes and cuts and bruises all over him. Even his armor is like damaged here and resewn. This robe that they have is actually chainmail, so you can even see the chainmail peeking through where he's just had this like chunk ripped off from his shoulder pads here, and that's because this guy is almost more of a like if you were talking like D&D classes, he's like a paladin mixed with the barbarian, and so he just rushes into battle, weapon swinging, causing mayhem, and doesn't really care what damage he takes because he has the mark of Lemire, and Lemire is the goddess of life, and specifically persistence and a big boon that she gets from being one of her marked individuals is regeneration. And so he essentially has a Wolverine style healing factor. So he can just take ridiculous blows and kind of just shrug it off because it's going to heal right back up in a couple minutes, as long as it wasn't like an arm getting chopped off or something, you know. And so his armor, on the other hand, is not so fortunate. So you can see like it's in constant repair. In fact, I might even add like a few scratches to his shoulder pads here, but I want to really show off the scars and this fun little like stitching I did. But as far as like who he is, he was born in Arceus, but he left and joined a mercenary group. And so a bunch of other mercenaries in your army will know this guy. And so I won't spoil things because I have a tendency to talk about these characters I really like that I make. But you have a few options with how you deal with this guy. But he's not recruitable initially. So he will mostly come off as just a religious zealot enemy. And you have to just like, oh no, we have to deal with him. But there are ways that you can not just kill every character in the game. That's one big thing I want to highlight with lots of these enemies is you don't have to kill them. You can capture them, and they may not join you, but you can talk with them later as prisoners and whatnot. So it actually behooves players to try and go out of their way to not just wipe out everybody. You can if you just want to play it the old-fashioned Fire Emblem way and just route everyone. But I've grown attached to like making enemies that could almost be units, right? Where you kind of like you expect them like, where's the unit that I have that talks to them to recruit them, right? Where's that option? Because it feels like they should be recruitable. And I like that kind of being flipped on its head and saying, yeah, these are just regular people that you're fighting against, and some of them have bad motivations, but they're mostly just regular people. They're not just mustache twirling evil guys and gals that would just murder and pillage for no reason other than for the love of it. So he's a great case of that. He's this sort of unusually approachable enemy that you feel like he should be on your side really, but you don't know how to convince him. And hint, there's someone later that can. So maybe don't try and kill this guy right away. But yeah, these were the two big portraits that I finished recently. Very happy with how they turned out. I did their accompanying unit sprites as well. I won't show off those right now because that'll take too much time. But I've got a brand new class that's in the game, which is the Zealot, which is this guy right here. And they've got all their... I actually don't know. I think I have all their abilities added into the game as well. Maybe not the shield. I do need to do the shield part. They more or less can like... They have a permanent, more or less like packed shield, I guess is what you'd call it. In D&D terms, but it's a divine shield that they always have, and it levels up with them. So they're like, they pretty much can defend themselves, but go into like divine frenzy mode and whatnot. So perfect class for this kind of guy. So that's all for now about him. Does anyone have questions that I haven't seen, or Lilette, did you want to make any notes?
No, I think you explained it really well. I am actually really curious about how this ties into Chapter 5. And what people can expect in the game.
Yeah, so Chapter 5 specifically is about the final moments of the Sarshan Rebellion. There's a bit of desperation going on in their end, and the Arceans, it's deliberately a little like samey sounding, right? Sartians, Arceans, they come from essentially the same part of the world, and Arceus was just a region of Sars, and so. But the conquerors kind of turned it into their own, like a new province. And so people will comment on that even in the world, that they don't like how confusingly similar it is. But that's actually how a lot of stuff happened in real life. There's so many like named places that are weirdly similar in our world. And I felt that was apt to have that kind of similar sounding name. So as far as where they lie in the story, I won't go into the nitty gritty of their motivations, but they're essentially unhappy with the regent because the regent was supposed to be temporary because the leader who was essentially their religious leader is gone, and without that religious leader, they feel that he's a pretender. Even if he is doing an okay job, like it's divinely like Avalia, who is the leader of not only the country but the religious group, kind of unwillingly, but still a leader, was like the word of the of Vime, essentially the god of order, and that's their god. And so without her around, um, they don't want to listen to the regent, more or less. And so it's kind of a political machination that's going on, and a crusade, because they essentially feel like, well, without the regent, or with the regent in power and no Avalia, really the church should be running the entire dominion, not some guy. Um, and so that's what their kind of baseline motivations are. They have other motivations that I won't get into, but that's the crux of why they're there. So this guy specifically is he's the new commander, essentially, of the army of Arceus, leading this crusade, and he's tasked with facing off against Perrine specifically and taking out her army. Because even though like they're a powerful force, they're kind of like they're an army of religious warriors, right? So they're your classic crusaders. They don't really think about like, well, is this a tactically sound maneuver? It's more like, well, we're blessed by our god of order, so we're gonna win, right? Even though they don't win. um, so he's just kind of going by the order of the high priest to take on this much larger force. And really he's like also supporting the Sartians in their defense, and he specifically has dealt with a lot of combat, and so they deemed him the best fit to support the Sartians in their defense. So it's sort of a doomed ploy. The writing is on the wall that the Sartians cannot hold out against the might of the entire Avalonian kingdom, like forces, the united forces, and so there's no way they can win. But you know, they've endeavored into this war, and they're pretty much fighting it out to the end, or at least so they appear to try and do. So I will leave it at that. But he's pretty much the new crusade leader, and that's why you face off against him. The previous one, you're not really supposed to fight him. You fight his forces, but he's too powerful for you to really like square off against him with your units, and so it's kind of meant to be that he either retreats or you convince him to leave, whichever goes. So yeah, that's what this dude's all about. But yeah, other than that, so moving forward, so that's chapter 5. Chapter 5, it's religious war, last defense of Sarsh, and so on. After that, assuming you win the battle, of course, Sars is reconquered, and you have to move towards dealing with these religious rebels who still occupy and control essentially the entire southern section past this main river. And you have to fight them. And chapter 6 is going to be really interesting because it's going to be a culmination kind of a lot of magic in the game. Not only like will it feature lots of the order magic, which I've been working on and has shown up in previous chapters, but they're going to be employing magic from all the main elemental groups, which includes fire, earth, and air. So I have to do some work on the air magic specifically, and get that all hammered out. So that'll be fun to do. But there's also going to be a brand new character that shows up. There's a few new characters that show up. One I've already finished, but the newest one will be a backer character that shows up. So I'm really excited to introduce that character into it. It's one of those, like, I guess like the previous one, even though it was like a chapter 5, chapter 5 is sort of a progressive chapter in that it's sort of, you can see what's going to happen, you know the task at hand. Chapter 6 is another one of those, this is a really big battle and we don't really know how it's going to shake out, and there's a lot of like subterfuge shenanigans going on in the background, much like chapter 3. Chapter 3 was like, and so that's kind of a theme of the game, right? Is that every third chapter there's some large important story point that's going to come up, and that's the case in chapter 6, which means that the the expectation is that there's a lot of like crazy stuff going on in the battle. There's going to be a lot of scenes, there's going to be a lot of characters being introduced who are saying, hey, this is what my deal is, etc., etc. So I'm going to be spending probably a lot of time on chapter 6. It's going to feature also one of the most impressive like structures in the world, which is the Tower of Vime, and it's this gigantic golden tower. So that's going to be fun to sprite out because I've been wanting to do that for a while. So yeah, that's kind of chapter 6. I won't say too much more about it until I'm actually working on it. I'm probably going to start doing the mapping of it all out by the end of next week, because next week I'm going to be testing out chapter 5, making sure everything's peachy keen, and then moving on to chapter 6. So yeah, that's what we can look forward to with chapter 6. And then the other developments that I've had are, other than the music going on, which for those who have tuned into previous streams, this is a brand new track. This is the theme of Isadara, everyone's favorite silver-haired lady in the armor and whatnot. So this is her track. This plays whenever she is like front and center in a scene, or if it's about her, or if her and her people are talking, essentially. So this one will pop up quite often, and it's a pretty extensive and complicated track. So I had Adam work on this one a lot. I actually made him remake the entire thing. Not remake entirely, but he sent me the first draft, and I said, it sounds great, but it also sounds like Lord of the Rings, and I don't want it to sound like Lord of the Rings. And so he redid a lot of it, and it sounds wonderful. It sounds just like how I imagined the Onvala would be, and that's why it's playing in the background right now, because I love this track. So that's new. And then I wanted to just kind of like show you guys like how easily I can forget that I added items in, and just like I'll just spend a day or two re-adding, like not re-adding them, but actually implementing them. So I want to give a quick rundown of just like some items that I added recently, and that's going to just be through Photoshop here. But I'll take a quick second in case Lilette has anything to say, or if anyone's said anything in chat.
No, I think you summed it up, Lazy Warlock. I think honestly with chapter 5, we've got, okay, let's see here. Chapter 5. So obviously goal is 11 chapters by the end of this. I think we're pacing really well to chapter 8.
Yeah, and like, so even though like I say chapter like 11 chapters, I guess really what I mean is like 11 battles, right? 11 main story like chapter battles that you do, and that will include the prologue, the interludes. So the interludes are more or less like, they're not main chapter, they are main chapter related, but they're kind of like, oh, this is away from the like main storyline, and it's important obviously, but it's usually a smaller map and more manageable, and you don't have your whole army getting into the conflict. And so it'll include the prologue, the first interlude, and then ideally the second interlude if we can manage it, but I don't know if we'll get that far. So yeah, 11 total playable chapters, not necessarily all the way to chapter 11, but hopefully to chapter 11 is what we're aiming for at least. But yeah, I do think we are tracking really well. I mean, like every now and then it's like, man, already so much time has gone past, but at the same time, we've gotten so much done, and we're very happy with how everything looks and plays so far. So we have less and less bugs moving forward too, even though I keep adding in more spells and whatnot, because there's just like all the big features have really been ironed out. I think the next big like feature hurdle will be finishing up a lot of the in-between menus, so the convoy menus more or less, right? So managing your units between battles. That'll be another like, yeah, another thing got locked out. Yeah, that button's not working, kind of thing that we're gonna need a lot of bug testing help for. So real quick, I'm just gonna jump through a bunch of these cool items that I introduced to the game because I remade the entire equipment system. So this is kind of a under the hood sort of talk at the moment, but pretty much the way equipment works in the game for enemies, right, is when an enemy spawns, it looks for, okay, what's my class? What equipment set does it use? Like, I use shields, swords, armor, and maybe a trinket, right? Like a headband or a ring or something, right? And then it'll look for, well, what region am I from? And it looks at that region and it says, okay, here's all the items that I can choose from. Well, what level am I? Because level essentially like relates to their rank, right? So, oh, I'm high enough level to be a captain, so I get captain level equipment, and then it picks from that list of equipment that I can use. So I completely redid it from the old version, which was kind of this cumbersome switching between each individual group and then switching for each individual. Like, it was too many like switchings and choosings, and it was just this huge long list that was getting out of control. And so I completely revamped it, made it so that I can just copy paste pretty much an entire nation and then just fill in the items that they use specifically, and blingo blango blongo, they have their equipment list. So, and I can fine tune it as much as I like still. So if I decide, okay, I want these guys to specifically use warhammers and long swords or something, I can do that. And even though I could do that before, it was much more cumbersome to do, and now it's in these like consolidated lists that are really easy for me to access. So that inevitably led me to be like, okay, I have this sprite, don't I? But I don't have that item in the game for some reason. So here's the list of all the random things that I introduced, and this is a small list because I can't even remember all of them that I added. But these are the take-home winners, right? The first thing I did was introduce the Arcean ones. So lots of golden-looking weapons here. They're all called Hallow Blades or Hallow weapons because they're quote-unquote hallowed to deal with aberrant creatures. So the undead, realmlings, which are anything that enters the realm of Nysera that's not meant to be there. And they're all really good at killing them, more or less, because it essentially their artifice to reorder whatever they were supposed to be back into that state. So for undead, it reorders them into being dead. And for things that were not supposed to be here, it reorders them into not being here, which is dead. So and people in the game will comment on like, well, so why does it make it better at like doing this? And they'll go into this long complicated like, well, it's blessed by so and so, and then they'll just say, so it just kills them really well. Yeah, I guess it just kills them really well. But they all have this really neat kind of Indo-Persian look to them. So you'll see with lots of them, there's these little handguard things, and Lugal has one of these. So Lugal is using a Hallow Blade. Most of them are also, because they're specifically designed to deal with like aberrant creatures, lots of them are kind of designed for dealing with them, not just like their make, but their shape. And that's really apparent with Hallow Pikes. So this is the spear variant of it. And they actually can attack from a range. So they'll send like a small wave of essentially ordering energy, which like it's not really light, but you know, it's like the classic like golden fire of some religious kind of whatever you want to call it. It's just like pure ordering energy, and it purifies them, and they can actually shoot it more or less like a laser. And so I've got drawings somewhere of guys using these, but they essentially just like keep these zombies, or rag whites is usually what they're using them against, at a distance with their spears, and just kind of like shoot them from far away, and then when they get close they can stab them. So they're all defensive in that way, so they've all got little guards on them to protect their hands when they're just in the midst of stomping these enemies. So you got hollow blades, hollow axes, hollow pikes, the whole regalia. So all three of those were added in, so they all have their like elite equipment for their best units. And then I just started adding in like stuff that I had drawn up, but just for whatever reason didn't include in the item list. So this is a unique item. It's given to Devia, who's that cool long hair banded character that pops up every now and then. She gets a unique sword. It's mostly just a gift from another character, and I just wanted to design her a cool sword. It actually shows up on her back too, so it swaps out with her kind of generic greatsword that she has. So that was just a fun design to do. It has a little background, but I won't get into it because it's in the game. So you'll have to watch it when you play or learn it when you play the game. This is my fancy new artifice item, which is just so pretty. It took me a while to get like the shape right because drawing a tilted prism it's kind of hard sometimes with pixel art. And so it took a few tries to get the shape just right, but boy, do I like how pretty and shiny this weapon looks. And so I'm really glad that I decided to make this item. I gave it plenty of space to do the pixel art with, and I think it's just going to look cool. I'm going to do the actual sprite work for the casting, like actually using it in game in a little bit as well, so that Ania will finally have a brand new weapon to use, and she won't be confusing to utilize as a unit anymore. So this is just, I just like it. Love the color palette. No notes. And then these are just kind of the random stuff I had lying around that I'd done with the intent of including them and didn't. So you got your composite bows. So now there's finally a better bow to use in the game for that's like not magical. And it's just like, it's a composite bow. It's made of different materials. It's a little better. It's cool looking. The sprite, the mini sprite, which I don't have here right now, is like really pretty looking. I was like on my top tier pixel art game for whatever reason doing that. We got warding poles. This is going to show up by the against the Veltwinnie because they utilize these advanced halberds that more or less project a small field of anti-magic around them. Not really anti-magic, sorry. It's more like deflecting magic, so they can deflect attacks easily. But it's mostly just, even in the description, it even says like it's mostly just a functioning halberd that has an added warding ability. So that's what they like. They don't like fancy anything. They just want it to work as intended. This is actually an arena reward. So any anime sleuths out there may be able to pick out the reference. But it's from one of my favorite animes. It has this really unique design, and it's one of the only swords I ever show that's sheathed right now in the picture because it has this really cool like sleeve that it goes over. So it's mostly an Easter egg item, and that's why it's found in the arena. It's actually when you bring it to the archaeologists and the like bladesmiths there, and you can actually ask about items in the game and be like, what is this? Where does it come from? Because it's weird looking. And they'll be like, oh, yeah, I've heard about this, but honestly, I don't know who made it. I don't know where it's from because it's not made in the style of any swordsmith in Nysera. And they usually call anything like this a realm thing, which is something from a different realm. And it's usually like it's essentially like an Easter egg item. Is they don't know it, but that's the only way they can explain it, is that this is some weapon that's from a different realm, and we don't really know how it got here because nobody here makes things like this. So they're usually one of a kind. And then this is just one of my favorite axes that I've made. This is based off the Igorot axe from the Philippines and the like Malaysian area. And it's an ice axe, and it just breaks stuff really easily. It's essentially an anti-armor weapon. It will obliterate any armored unit with ease, and it just looks cool. So I decided to finally add this into the game. I have no idea why I didn't add it in before because it looks awesome. So that was my highlights of the little like item spree that I went on, just like perusing through my old sprites, being like, oh yeah, I made this. Why isn't it in the game yet? So that was my my sort of cleanup. I did all that last week too. Was just like pretty much code cleanup and adding stuff in that should be in the game. So a little closer up image.
Nice. Yeah, it looks very aquatic, and it surprises me that it's of Malaysian Filipino origin. So that's or not surprises me. I actually just didn't even know about it. Very cool looking, and actually it has a Zelda vibe a little bit. So like the fish people.
Yeah, so it's pretty much made of like a special type of ice metal. It's a byproduct actually of making a different type of metal. So when you make wake steel in the game, it also produces rime steel if you know what you're doing. So you can actually get 2 ingots out of one when you make it, but they have different uses. And so for smiths, it's kind of a conundrum because even though they use the material to make 2 ingots, they may only get 1 ingot of the one they want. And so, but it still makes for a really powerful artificing tool and obviously as a weapon if you know what you're doing. But you have to wear specific gauntlets, otherwise you will freeze your hands off. So, very powerful stuff. But yeah, that's let me see, what else did I write down? Oh, there is one more thing I did do, which is I also added in males to the villagers now. So there are now dudes and ladies that show up in the game. I've mostly had just like as a test run just on women, but now I added in a full suite of men that show up in the game, and so I have to tweak it a little bit because I need more facial like shapes. I only have one like cheek structure, so I end up seeing like a lot of the same guys when I do it, but still happy with how smoothly it was to add in that specifically. And I took the opportunity to add in pretty much a bunch of like bandit gear, so that was really fun. So now there's like torn up brigandine and jack plates and whatnot, real fun stuff that like because like there's armor in the game that you technically can get that's like low grade equipment that these bandits use, and I like that armor even though it technically is not useful for the player, right? But it's specifically I just like how it looks because it's just weird. Like if you've ever seen jack chain plate, it's really neat stuff, but it's kind of bad armor ultimately, because it's essentially what they gave to people who like were either mercenaries and it was the best that they could afford, or it was like you're a conscript and you just grab any armor you can possibly find so you don't die. So not suitable for say the player, but very suitable for a bunch of bandits. I might actually see if I can find it real quick. Yeah, so excuses for the green background, I'll just turn that off. Yeah, so I was just working on all these cool armors, and to show you what like jackplate looks like, it's just very funny, and it's kind of crazy to me that it even existed, but it did. Jackplate. Yeah, so that's kind of what it looked like. I'll get rid of the hood. Hoods are the classic bandit thing. Whoops. Yeah, so it's all layered. It's actually a rather interesting process. But yeah, so jackplate is pretty much these like cobbled together looking chains and plates on the arms, because it's real expensive to cover your entire arms with metal back in the day. And so people would pretty much get like just enough metal so that if someone swung at them from the side, it wouldn't just lop their arm off completely, right? It might break their arm, but at least they wouldn't lose it. And so that's what this was for, essentially. And then they've got like the Gambison armor underneath. And this is actually based off of an actual existing jack plate that we still have today. So minus this chest plate here, which I also based off of some old drawings, where if people could get even half a chest plate, so this is technically like half, you usually have like another sliding piece underneath this. So this guy only has one, so just enough to cover the heart maybe. So kind of, you know, give you the sense of they're just using whatever they can get their hands on. And the fun part about the guys is that I can do facial hair, so beards. But yeah, this is an idea of like pretty much how the randomizer works for units, the portraits. So bandits and knights and just generic units that speak in conversations, they will also be incorporated into this system. So you'll see people, I did it for the Sartians, so there's like generic Sartian units that are talking to their commanders like, what are we gonna do about this, blah 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 blah, and they show up as just a generic portrait now, which is great because I don't have to like do a unique portrait for every villager. But like I also found, because the reason I mentioned this before, but the reason I endeavored into this, right, is that I never really cared for how they did villagers in Fire Emblem specifically, in that they gave so little time and attention to them. Whereas like, okay, we got six portraits max of these guys, and it's all the same looking guy or same looking lady, and then there's one old guy that is shuffled between every single village on the planet. And I just thought it would be worthwhile to have this very diverse, interesting looking system of villagers. And there is some like similarities obviously between them, especially with like the faces, because I can only draw so many different types of faces without driving myself insane. And really it's like the body shapes that I only have kind of one version I can do. But with like full clothing I can change it a little bit, but I have to be careful about that. So yeah, that's what the last big kind of visual update thing that I can think of. And so yeah, that's what's been going on. This week I'm gonna be working on cleaning up the last bits of chapter 5, and then hopefully, fingers crossed, moving into chapter 6, which is going to be a extravaganza of magic and colliding of a bunch of units. It's going to be great. So I'm excited for it. And I think that's pretty good for the last couple minutes. If there's any questions floating out there, I can answer them, even if we want to do a goofy question before we finish up.
Sorry, I was just sneezing. Okay, goofy question. So, goofy question would be, let's see. How long do you think you'd survive in a zombie apocalypse?
Ooh, probably not very long. I don't have great cardio. I would rely entirely on my knowledge of playing Project Zomboid, which would probably not get me very far, actually.
Well, you know, you've survived pretty long in Project Zomboid, I feel like, so that's better than if you always died in Project Zomboid.
Only when I try to help people. If I'm all on my own, I can last forever, but if I have to help people, then I usually die. And I'm pretty sure that's how it would go with me in real life too. I'd be like, if I can just hole up in my house and, you know, get rid of the stairs and then survive until I can, you know, manage to go out or something, I'd be okay. But as soon as there's like 5 people around me I gotta take care of, I'd be like, oh, I'm gonna help you from the zombie. Oh, and then I got bit instead. Oh well. time to die.
I
What
don't-
about you? How long do you think you'd live in a zombie apocalypse?
Well, I have an injury, so I think I'd be really vulnerable if anything happened, you know? And I'd say like I don't have like I'm in decently okay shape, so I'm with practice, right? If you survive past a certain point, I'd say like with anything, if you get to a certain point, then you're okay for a long time. It's just getting to that certain point. So as long as you reached, I'd say if you reach like 6 months, right, then you're doing pretty good compared to the rest of the population. But so the problem with that is I could barely cook myself food, and I don't even know what's edible out there. I just looked up the other week that bark is edible, so I really don't know anything.
Only some barks though, not all barks.
Exactly, like most pine is good. You know, we have a lot of pine here. Like I know how to build a fire. I'd say like I'd be a pretty decent scavenger, to be honest. Like I think I can make it a couple weeks. But yeah, I think I'd probably have a problem with how little, like how fast I can go through food and stuff. So
Yeah, I guess like the big question, right, would be, do you escape into the country where there's less people, right? Or do you try and like survive in the city?
I would probably try to survive in the suburbs. So like neither.
Well, yeah, I guess like well, I mean city suburbs, you know, like where civilization be.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I would be dependent, I think. I'd be a little street rat because I couldn't take care of myself out in the wilderness. So I would definitely scavenge. I'd be huge on scavenging. And to be honest, I'm a little bit of a goober. So I really, you know, I'm this close away from exploring like someone else's house and taking all of their chocolate. So like I don't have any moral qualms about what would have to be done in the zombie apocalypse, you know.
Right.
But I am like I burn through a lot of food really fast. So I think my biggest trouble honestly would be keeping up with and same thing for you. I think you and I burn through stuff really fast, so it actually work against us in a time where you want to conserve energy and not starve and all that. So yeah.
Right.
But I think I could make it. I'd say I could make it 3 weeks, and but 6 months would be, you know, really hard.
I agree. I think at the 6-month point though, that like either the authorities and whatever government has either like figured out a solution, right? Or there's no going back and the world's ending.
Yeah.
At which point, like, the average individual is not going to make it.
Yeah, and really it would be, you know, we have a network of people that we know, and so we'd likely just cluster together in our own little tribes.
Right.
That's probably what would happen is we would just have we would naturally band together, you know. So I think actually we'd all survive for a while because it takes time for things like that to break down. But I guess like if the outbreak happened in a way that like it was really fast, then like what we saw in COVID, we'd
Right. I think there'd be a lot of disbelief going on that would just like spiral into madness.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the people that I would be wary of is the people who didn't take care of themselves in COVID. I just wouldn't even invite them to my group.
Ooh.
Yeah, I'd just be
Makes
like,
sense though.
yeah, be like, you know, I really, but yeah, I don't know, it depends. I'd be just nervous. I'd be like, did you already catch it and you're spreading it to everyone else? I'd be wary, to be fair. I would just be wary. 'Cause yeah, we're doofs. The human race, we're just a bunch of doofs.
All right. Well, that's good timing because it's 8 o'clock.
Alrighty. Thanks so much for coming along with us and listening to Chapter 5 and our dev update. And leave any questions you have below the Discord link if you want to join our Discord and talk with folks. And actually, that's where the Lazy Warlock will post all of the updates in detail. So these kind of YouTube video updates are like usually summaries of what Lazy Warlock shares on like a weekly basis on the Discord.
Right.
So yeah, if you wanted to keep track of updates, be a little bit closer to it, mingle, and even like influence any part of the game, like we love hearing just people's feedback with the demo and all of that. So you know, if you want to be an active member in the development of the game, then go ahead and join the Discord below. We also have plenty of other videos for you. We do like a lot of Speaker Sundays, and that's let's see here. We have like a Speaker Sunday playlist and Wreck-It Wednesday playlist. So definitely check it out on the channel if you are interested to learn more. But otherwise, yeah, you know, everybody have a great Sunday and enjoy the rest of your week.
Yep. Thank you all for checking it out if you did, and we'll see you next time.
See you next time.
Bye.